Hello. I wanted to touch on another subject today because since I've been doing the resources for children with ASD and ADHD, and I gave you a glimpse into the story of my life with my son who's 23 and now in prison, I've had so many messages from you telling me that you feel the same as some of the bits that were in my story, and you're worried about the future and your child. And the sheer love that I got through the messages, I thought it might be worth doing some more videos and going through some of the things that I went through, and particularly one subject, because this is the subject that I seem to have had the most messages about. And this one's quite a hard topic, so if you're not feeling that great, then possibly listen to this at another time. But I wanted to talk about suicide and the way that living with a child with ADHD and dealing with them on a daily basis can make you feel as a mum, made me feel as a mum. There are two incidences that I can relate to, that I can recall to you, that were absolutely devastating in my life and made me realise that I needed support and help. And I think that's one of the key messages through this, is if you are feeling this way, you can't do it on your own. You need to get some support and some help in. But we'll talk about why we don't get that help as well. The first time I was at work and I had quite a busy job. I was working I think I was working for a company called CITB at the time, actually. So I was travelling up and down the country all the time. And what was particularly good about this job was, for the first time in the 20 odd years that I'd had David, who was had ADHD, I was able to get away from it. Because he played up mainly with me, mainly his frustrations were with me, and this job required me to travel, so I was able to go up and down the country and stay in hotels, and I'll forever be grateful for that time away. Coming home, as you know, if my son asked for a time, that time had to be stuck to. He couldn't deal with 10 minutes late or hold-ups in any way. It was, I'd asked you a time, you told me a time, I expect the time to be the time. And it doesn't matter how many people say, oh, well, it's a fact of life. The fact of life with an ADHD child is that they are driven by time and by what you say is what the reality is, particularly when there's an ASD trait in there as well. So this particular time, he'd called me and asked me what time I was going to be home, and I told him the time. And as I was driving, I think I was driving up from Devon actually, and the traffic was horrendous, absolutely horrendous. And for anybody listening, I think, oh, well, it's just traffic. But actually the anxiety that builds up knowing that I was going to be late home and knowing what I was going to get when I came through the door was horrendous. I would sit and I'd be tapping the pedals because I knew that I needed to get home, and my mind would be running all over the place. I mean, how people who are dealing with this don't have more accidents, I don't know, because all I was thinking about was, how can I play this when I get in? What am I going to do to make this situation better? How can I manipulate the situation so I can get in and there be no trouble? Anyway, I was driving along, and call after call after call saying to me, you're supposed to be home, flitting from one end of, all right, mum, you said you were going to be home, to the very next call being, for fuck's sake, you told me you were going to be in, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that. And me just knowing that this build-up was going to be even worse. And with the content of what he was saying in the messages, I knew that either he didn't have cigarettes. Yep, he smoked. I don't smoke. My husband doesn't smoke, but he smoked. And when he didn't smoke, boy, did we know about it. He smoked cannabis constantly. I've told you before that the youth service said, oh, well, you need to pick your battles and this will help calm him down. Well, when somebody tells you that, just think it through a little bit, because in a couple of years, when he now thinks that somebody has given him the permission to do it because it helps with his symptoms, and yet mum and dad are not going to be funding that because it's very expensive, you know, £10 to £20 a day, and we can't afford it. Well, when they go without, just watch out for that one, because you do set yourself up on that one. Anyway, I knew that he didn't have cigarettes. I came through the door, parked up, sat in my car for a little bit, came through the door. As I came through the door, the atmosphere was just, I just knew he was waiting for me. He was in the room and I knew he was waiting for me. And so I went in, I tried to play it down. I tried to, oh, the traffic was really busy. Sorry about that. Sorry, I'm late home. Nah, that didn't work. The first thing he would do is look at me and go, what the fuck are you talking to me for? And sorry for my language, but this is the kind of thing that we live with ADHD. It's not nice and pleasantries, and it's not about, you know, going in and people just having a general argument. The word cunt comes up an awful lot. The fact that you're a slag comes up an awful lot. The language, you know, people can look at us and put us down and say, you know, bad parenting. It isn't bad parenting that their language is like that. It's not language that I use, but it's language that he used, and it was all the time, constantly. And that night it escalated and escalated. You know, I'm going to smash your fucking face in. You told me this, you told me that. Eventually, he went upstairs and pulled absolutely everything he could find from his bedroom and just threw it all down the stairs. So I was looking at the contents of his room at the bottom of my stairs. His sister came out. His sister is 1 year older. They started to come together and clash, and she was like, leave her alone, and he was like, get out my fucking way, I'm gonna smash you up if you don't get out of the way. And there's me, and you will know this, you don't want things to escalate. So I was begging my daughter to stand down and let me deal with it. And I'm begging my son to stop doing it. But the clash, and then I had this anxiety and fear that these two are going to have massive arguments. And you know, regularly he would hold her up against the door by her neck and things. So I had to get out. I just didn't know how to deal with this anymore. It was every day and it was all the time. And so I thought, right, I need to go and get him cigarettes. And I got in my car and I drove, and I forgot about the cigarettes, and I went down to a car park and I sat in the car park and I cried for probably about 45 minutes, and I sobbed. And I just thought to myself about, this is it. This is it. Every single day I'm going to have to deal with this, and there isn't any way out of it. And at that point, I just wanted a way out. And I just sat and thought about what was the easiest way to go. And I thought about my daughters, and I thought about, you know, how the impact on them would be. But in my mind, I justified that by saying, well, actually, he doesn't kick off when I'm not there. He can hold his temper a bit, and they've got Jonathan, and he will deal with them, and you know, things will be okay. It was one of the worst times ever, and I sat looking at the wall, and I sat revving my engine and thinking to myself, if I drive into that wall and I drive into it hard enough, that wall will come down on me and this will all be over. It took me a while, and I called the Samaritans. I sat and called the Samaritans, and somebody answered the phone and asked me what was it, and I said, I can't deal with my son anymore. I didn't really get the response that I wanted. I don't know what I wanted. I think I wanted somebody to say to me, oh, just stop being stupid, just pull yourself together, but you didn't get that response. But what it did do is he asked me to explain what it was I was thinking, and I told him, and then I thought about it, and all of a sudden I knew I wasn't going to do it. I was sat there and I really wanted to do it, but I knew I wasn't going to do it for all the reasons why we shouldn't do it, because life does go on and we have to deal with it in some way, and the other children are there, and the devastation that I would leave behind, and who would cope with him? What chance would he have then? If I did this, what chance would he have? Because I'm the only one that understands him. So I did go home. I went to the doctors the next day, and I made sure I got supported through that. It didn't make it any easier to put up with what was going on, but it made me feel more able to cope with those things. I think it did, because I did carry on and cope with them. Then the second time, and you're not at this stage yet, but you know, there is always a conclusion to some things. The second time was Christmas this year. And Christmas this year, my son got sentenced to the time in prison. He got 7.5 years. He got 10 years, but reduced to 7.5 years. And as that sentence was handed down to him, part of my life completely died. 23 years I'd had my son, and for 18 of those years I protected him from everything that was going on. You know, I made excuses for him. I comforted him when he was at his absolute lowest. I went to every meeting. I fought for him. I got every service that I possibly could. And his paediatrician had told me, where do children end up like this? Well, I'm afraid to say that probably 2/3 of them will end up in prison. It's their own death in some way, either murder or suicide. And I couldn't believe it when he said it. I thought he was being cruel. But here was my son, and he was ending up in exactly that place. And I thought about it. And I thought about all the services that had let them down. You know, all the way along, he had been failed and let down. But then I thought about the fact that it wasn't just them, it was me as well. And I had this huge, huge guilt that I didn't do enough. And every step of his life played through in my head. And that went on for days and days and days. And I thought I could go back to work. Oh, you know, he got sentenced one day. I thought I could go back the next day. I couldn't go back. Something just clicked. I was now in a real grieving process for my son because he'd gone, but not just this grieving, but a whole sense of failure. I went and got some counselling for that. It was really important that I did get to talk to somebody about it, and I worked it through with them. And actually, he made me feel, or made me see, helped me to work it through to see that actually there was a whole load of things that could have changed. And I was learning all the way through. You know, you can't blame yourself because of a situation that develops over years. We have these babies, and everybody tells us about feeding and changing nappies and bathing babies, and they tell us about the toddler stage, and what they don't tell us is everybody's brains are wired differently, and your child may be one that doesn't fit that factory mode and is different, and they don't tell you how to cope with that when that happens. So here I was with my son in prison and my life falling apart, you know, all of that time, and I'd been able to cope with it, and then all of a sudden he's gone, and this huge guilt came over me. And again, and this time it was different, because this time when I felt like this, it wasn't a practically thinking how I could get out of this situation. This time, when I was feeling that I no longer wanted to be here, it was almost like there was a natural progression. Something had gone, and now I needed to move to the next stage. I'd had enough. And in the middle of the night, I would wake up and I would be thinking about tablets and how to take those tablets and slip away. And I thought about, you know, I thought about, it was really strange. I woke up and I thought, why don't I just go and run a bath, and I could slip away in the bath. That was a really, really hard time for me, and I didn't think I was going to come back from that. So again, like I said to you at the beginning, the most important thing was that I went and got help. And I went to the doctors and I said to him about what had happened. And I said to him, I have been facing all of this, and I told him about how the services let you down. And he put his hand on me and he said, let me tell you, you have been let down. You've not let your son down. You've been let down. People are not ready. And he told me about the story of his own, and he said how lucky he was that he was in the profession, because people would listen to him. And he said how difficult it would be for the person on the street, because immediately they jump to parenting, and you know, some of it is parenting. We all got to admit that some of it is parenting, but that wasn't the whole reason for it. I'm now on antidepressants. I'm not ashamed to say that I'm on antidepressants. I am. It is my life-saving bit at the moment. I know that because of how I felt at Christmas. If I had a broken leg, I wouldn't walk around with my leg snapped in two. I would make sure I went and got something to hold my leg into place. And at that moment in time, my head was broken in two and I needed something to hold it in place. And I am happy to, you know, I'm not happy, but I am okay with telling you that I'm on antidepressants. And I tried to come off them recently, and immediately that guilt came back. So I know that there's more that I need to be working through. But I wanted to share this with you because I'm here and I'm functioning, and yeah, I have down days, but you can get through this, and there are people around. You're not on your own. There are people around who are going through this all the time, but your children do need you. But I'm going to do another one later on about responsibility, because I think we take a lot of responsibility, and actually our children do need to take some responsibility, particularly when they get older, and there are consequences to their actions. And one of the consequences can't be that you feel like it has to be the end of something. It has to be the end of your life or something like that. It's, you know, you need to self-harm, you need to drink to cope with it and things. That can't be a consequence of what they're doing. We need to deal with that ourselves. So you're not on your own. It's harrowing. It's really, really hard. But more people need to speak up about how they feel. We hear a lot about male suicide, and we can't get away from that because it's so important. There are so many. But there is a niche of people who are dealing with children who have ADHD, and life is so unbearable that these are thoughts that people have. And I want you to know that I have been there, and I know that, and we need to talk and speak up about it. So please talk to somebody. Don't hold it in. Have a great day.